Okay, so here's a mind-bending idea for you. What if proving anything is 100% true is actually logically impossible? Sounds crazy, right? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive into a really cool philosophical puzzle that completely shakes up what we think we know about, well, knowing things. So let's just jump right in. I want you to think about something for a second. Something you are absolutely, positively sure is true. Got it? Okay. Now, could you prove it? I mean, really prove it with 100%, unshakable, no shadow of a doubt certainty? You know, as humans, we just crave certainty, don't we? We want that solid ground to stand on. We build our entire lives, our science, our societies, all on what we think are unshakable facts. We need those truths we can always fall back on. But what if that solid ground is more like an illusion? What if total certainty is just always out of reach? That's what we're digging into today. It's this really powerful idea that says the whole quest for absolute proof, it's a dead end. But, and this is the cool part, it's actually not a bad thing. It's surprisingly freeing. So this barrier, this philosophical roadblock, it actually has a name. It's called the Munchausen Trilemma. And honestly, you can think of it like this unbeatable logical trap. Let's take a look at how it works. The whole idea is actually pretty straightforward. It says that anytime you try to prove something, anything is true, you're going to get stuck. Your argument, your justification, it's forced down one of three paths. And here's the kicker. Every single one of them is a dead end. So let's imagine you're on this quest, right? You're looking for absolute truth. The trilemma is like this point in the road where it splits into three paths. And as we're about to see, it doesn't matter which path you choose, you're just not going to get there. So what are these three logical traps? I mean, this is really the core of it, right? Understanding these is the key to seeing why that feeling of absolute certainty is so darn hard to pin down. Okay, so here they are, the endless chain, the vicious circle, and the unproven start. The idea is that any argument, I mean literally any argument you can think of, from something super simple to a huge scientific theory, has to fall into one of these three buckets. All right, let's tackle the first one, the endless chain of reasoning. This one's going to feel familiar, I promise. You've definitely run into this before, even if you didn't have a name for it. It's also called infinite regress. Yeah, it's basically the toddler's favorite game, the endless why. You make a claim and someone asks why. So you give a reason, but then they ask why that's true. And on it goes. Each proof just requires another proof stretching on forever. You never actually hit bedrock. Okay, so if going on forever doesn't work, what's another option? Well, some arguments try to get clever. They try to escape that endless chain by looping back on themselves. This brings us to path number 2, the circular argument. This is exactly like trying to look up a word in the dictionary, but the definition just uses the word you're trying to define. It's totally useless, right? A classic example is someone saying, "You can trust this book because the book itself says it's trustworthy." The argument just eats its own tail. It proves absolutely nothing. All right, so you can't go on forever, and you can't argue in a circle. What's left? There's really only one other move you can make. You just have to stop. And that brings us to our third and final path, the unproven assumption. This is where you just have to plant your flag and say, this is where we start. You accept a core belief, an axiom, without any proof at all. You stop the chain of whys by basically saying, this part is true just because it is. It becomes the bedrock for all your other arguments, but that bedrock itself is just kind of floating there. It's ultimately an act of faith. Okay, wait. So if every attempt to prove something leads to one of these dead ends, isn't that depressing? Like, does it mean we can't know anything? No, absolutely not. In fact, getting your head around this is actually a huge unlock. It opens the door to a much, much better way of thinking. See, the trilemma isn't telling us to just give up. It's showing us that maybe, just maybe, the quest for absolute certainty was the wrong goal all along. So if we can't have perfect, bulletproof answers, what's the alternative? What should we be aiming for? This is where we make the big shift. We move away from this rigid quest for certainty where we need fixed answers and we're terrified of being wrong. And instead we embrace a path of inquiry, a path where it's all about asking thoughtful questions, where we practice a little humility, and where we actually learn from being uncertain instead of running from it. And that right there, that's called intellectual humility. And it's really the whole point. The goal isn't to build this fortress of beliefs that can never be challenged. The goal is to be more like a curious explorer who's always willing to update their map when they discover new things. Yeah, instead of getting bummed out about our limits, we can actually start to appreciate that the universe is just uncertain. And look, this doesn't mean you can't believe in anything. Of course not. It just means you hold those beliefs with an open hand, not a clenched fist. It's about accepting that what we know is always a work in progress. And that's okay. And you know what? This isn't just some abstract philosophical idea. It has huge real-world payoffs. It encourages us to be more open-minded. It makes us better listeners because we're genuinely curious about what the other person has to say. It makes us better learners. It turns pointless arguments into productive conversations. It's a total game changer. So I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Think about your own life. What's one of those unproven truths, one of those foundational assumptions that you rely on every single day? It could be a moral belief or something you take for granted, like the reliability of your own senses. Just thinking about that, recognizing that starting point, well, that's the first real step on the path to intellectual humility.